Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Isabella van Marle. I am an independent curator and co-founder of Pictures for Purpose, which is a foundation raising awareness and funds for different causes through the medium of photography. Earlier this year, we hosted a print sale fundraiser for Ukraine. And that was together with 45 international artists, including artists from the region. I think most of you are familiar by the work of Boris Mikhailov, who has, of course, been an important figure in Ukrainian photography. He has his great show, his retrospective in the map. If you haven't seen it, please do. And he has been a huge source of inspiration for the younger generation of artists. And it made me think when going to the show that it's such a pivotal moment to also offer a voice and a platform for a younger generation of artists. And therefore I am curating a show at the moment with 14 Ukrainian artists. So this group show is including work by Igor and Daria. Apart from that, I think it's really crucial not only to offer a platform in the form of presenting work, but also to have a voice for a younger generation of artists. And therefore, I got in touch with Holly, the curator of the Curiosa section, to organize a panel conversation on a new wave of Ukrainian photography. So I would like to first thank Holly and Paris Photo for giving this opportunity. And we invited two artists from Ukraine who are both not living in Ukraine at the moment. They're now in London and in Paris. But they are still creating work about Ukraine. You will both deeply dive into a conversation together with Nadia, who is an expert and a specialist in Ukrainian photography. So I will offer the stage to the three of you. I think it's really good that we can have this conversation, and there will be time for questions at the end. So please do ask questions. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Isabella. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for this conversation about the new wave of Ukrainian photography. I would like to thank one more time Isabella for organizing, in fact, and for conceiving this panel, this conversation, for inviting us, and for the possibility to bring our testimony and to show works of young Ukrainian photography today in the frame of Paris Photo. So from the very beginning of the Russian war against Ukraine, French public had already several opportunities to discover Ukrainian photography through the series of conferences and exhibitions, the most important of which is, of course, the retrospective and the different exhibitions of Boris Mikhailov, namely this one of Maison Européenne de la Photographie. I'll show several photos of Mikhailov only to reminder. So from the mid-1960s, Boris Mikhailov adopted a subversive photography practice that went against the Soviet visual culture and in particular official photography. He introduced references to amateur culture in his work and explored private, intimate, and then totally invisible side of a life. He used a variety of experimental techniques to expand the photographic language, which was extremely restricted by dogmas, norms, and prohibition of official photography in those moments. He worked also closely to the changing social reality of his country, providing a raw, critical, but very compassionate look to this reality. Boris Mikhailov was also one of founders and members of the community of photographers called today the Kharkiv School of Photography. Since the beginning of 1970s, the members of this community have been exploring alternatives to the official photography, playing with references to popular photography, adding a carnivalesque side to the grey and regulated everyday life, using private life as a source of freedom and lightness. The youngest generation, as Isabella mentioned, is now appropriating the heritage of the Kharkiv School of Photography, and they are influenced very often by the work of Boris Mikhailov. Immediately before the Russian invasion, Ukrainian photography was marked by the very tangible rise. Several photographers made bright careers in the domain of fashion photography. For instance, you can see the work of Synchrodox Group in the publication of Louis Vuitton City Guide dedicated to Ukraine. Several publishing houses started the promotion of young Ukrainian photography, and several museum institutions started to work with the heritage of the 20th century Ukrainian photography. During the summer 2021, the largest exhibition that we talked about together, organized in the largest venue in Kyiv, Mystetsky Arsenal, opened the milestone event called Sensitivity. This exhibition brought together several decades of photographic practices, historical and contemporary, offering a kind of panoramic view of Ukrainian photography today. So both of our speakers today were in fact participants of this exhibition that give me some kind of opportunity to make a smooth transition to the presentation of our today's speakers. So let me introduce Igor Chikachkov. Igor is a photographer and educator. He began working as photojournalist in 2008. In his artistic practice, he focuses on the body as a target for political subjugation, exploring the boundaries between public and private spaces. We have also Daria Svertilova, who was born in 1996 and born and raised in Odessa, in Ukraine. Daria is currently based between Kyiv and Paris, where she is finishing her master and École Nationale Supérieure des Arts Décoratifs in photography and video department. In her artistic practice, Daria aims to depict modern-day Ukraine. She explores connection between past and present, focusing mainly on the young generation of Ukrainians, as well as on the cultural and social context they live in. So I will leave them the floor with the first question. I will ask both of them to talk us about their photographic practice, pre-war practice, and maybe how did they pass first days and weeks of this unexpected large-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine. So Igor, can you please start?
Hello. Thank you. Like, if I will talk a lot, I can talk a lot about what I did before war, because it was like, yes, because I had a lot of different projects, but I will show just two of them, because they like milestones, and also they had some reflection on what I did after the war beginning. This series was my first series, which led me to art photography rather than documentary. And at that time, I was exploring how people live together in different, like, in rooms. So basically, I was living with different people, with my friends, with mostly friends, yes. And I was documenting how they live together. And at that time, I was interested in... So I began this with this photograph, which was shot in the dorm It was a small room, because Ukrainian dormitories, it's a very interesting place to visit. It's small rooms with 4 or 5 people sharing together. And that was so shocked for me, so I was interested in how people share their intimate spaces together. And that series was shot in something like 10 years ago. And after this series, I had a few exhibitions in Paris as well, and I understood that I don't want to be a documentary photographer anymore. I want to focus more on some personal stories. And at that time, mostly, I was questioning photography as a tool for talking about something very personal and very subjective, because before that I had this experience that photography is something, because I was a photojournalist, so for me it was mostly to talk about public events. But then I think literature and movies inspired me to try to sorry, it's a bit messy, to talk about something more personal. I will skip a few years and we'll talk on the last project which I did before the war. It's actually not something I did, it's something happened to my photography. My archive with 10 years of my photographs were destroyed, and when I restored it, it looked like this. So I had a lot of photographs which contains my personal work, some intimate photography, a lot of assignments and journalistic work. I was working for Forbes magazine a lot, so there are a lot of portraits. And eventually I made did this photo book, which were published shortly before the war by East Publishing, Ukrainian publisher. And before the war, my work was actually promoting this book. I had my presentation in Kharkiv just a few days before the war. I had a plan to go to Kiev and Lviv, and these plans were ruined during the war. So when the war started, I will tell about the first day of war. In the morning, I was living in Kharkiv, the same place where Boris Mikhailov lived. And my first I didn't know what to do, so I just packed my stuff and went somewhere west, had no idea. And what I did, because with this project, I've already was very interested how digital algorithms influence the image. And I was experimented with different digital tools and digital algorithms. So here what I did is I was taking photographs from the train when I was heading from east to west in the first day of war. And you can see in these panoramas that they're not quite right. There are a lot of digital glitches and mistakes, and I usually prefer to expose them in a huge format, like they're now exposed in Warsaw for more than 2 meters, and there you can see every detail, and it's something went wrong with this reality. So this was I didn't consider it as a project because it was just something I was subconsciously doing when I was heading somewhere east, somewhere west. Okay, and it's a bit messy because I wanted to give word to Daria.
Yes, sure, Daria. Can you also speak a little bit about the projects you're working on just before the war, and maybe just after the war started? What was going on with you?
Wait, the order of the slides is not the one that... yeah. Shall I...
Yes, of course.
Wait. Wait. Yeah, so... first of all, I wanted to precise that the war in Ukraine was like going on since 2014. So like there's a difference between full-scale invasion that started on the 24th of February 2022. And I remember that in 2014, I was a student, and I was really touched by the revolution of Maidan. And the revolution actually started from a student manifestation. So in 2019, I started a project about student dorms in Ukraine because I wanted to, first of all, show the young generation of Ukrainians, because for me, the young generation, like students, they represent the change in the country, and actually they were like this force that wanted to change things. And wait, sorry. And secondly, I wanted to make project about another reality, I mean, about hope and future and something bright, because most of the series done in Ukraine after 2014 were about like war and poverty and quite gloomy, I would say. And my work was focused on students living in student dorms, because for me, dorms were also the place of coexistence, Soviet heritage, and these young people who wanted to get rid of it. So they were decorating their rooms, like you can see on this picture, for example. And I was quite impressed visiting these places because they were kind of like really like art installations, in fact. And this one, for example. And what impressed me also is that these rooms, they were inhabited by students only for like 3 or 4 years, so not really a long time. And they knew that they would leave at some moment, but they were decorating them like they would stay there for a long time. And my series is called Temporary Homes because, actually they were, like these places, their rooms, they were a temporary home for them. And I also was thinking a lot about the notion of home, because when I started the project, I was living in France, and I moved in France in 2017, so I was a student myself. And I wanted, to answer to a question which place we could call home. And on the contrary from Igor, I was interested in more in the question of not how people co-live, but mostly how they make these spaces personal. So that's why on my pictures, on the contrary from yours, you don't see people together, like only on few. But I was particularly interested in showing them one by one, and how their spaces were personalized. So like you can see on the picture, it's actually like a view on a dormitory in Kiev, and every room is shared by 2 people, sometimes 3. And people actually live on a really, really little space. I mean, there's only tiny, like a thin wall between them, but everybody is getting along really well.
Yeah, I think it would be great. We mentioned several times this influence and the place that Boris Mikhailov took for his colleagues in Kharkiv during 60s, 70s, but also to the young generation, someone dialogue with his heritage and a lot of Ukrainians, Ukrainian photographers, tells it talk about his importance for their work, and I'd like to know whether Mikhailov did influence your work, or what is your relationship with his legacy? Someone of you.
Of course, living in Kharkiv, you can always feel this shadow of Boris Mikhailov on all young artists, not just photographers. Some of them hate him, some of them loved him, but there is always Boris Mikhailov present there, even if he's not living in Kharkiv anymore. As for me, I had also a long history of my relationship with his work. I love his work very much, but I think he influenced me even more, not just by his work, but with our conversation. We did have a lot of conversations, but I remember when we had these dialogues, I was going after dialogues and I would make some notes. And one of the things that struck me the most, and I think that it struck me so much because it was something that interested me in photography so much now, but I also felt, when he said it, I understood that this is also his approach to photography. He said that he always tried to find a proper language, a proper visual language to reflect on time in which he is now. So that's why we see he's constantly changing. He has a lot of very different series because times change and his work is changing. And this is always what interested me as well, because I was started with more classical work. Now I'm interested in digital algorithms because I feel that this is a contemporary language of photography. And I feel that Kharkiv School of Photography as well is something about feeling the time, talking about now. And this is how Boris influenced me.
Yeah, I'm also of course, familiar with the work of Boris Mikhailov, and I really admire his personality because I believe that he, for me, he's like a true artist. I mean, he was censored in Soviet Union, and his negatives were taken and destroyed. But he was continuing producing in spite of all the circumstances, and he produced a lot of different works. And I think that he's kind of an example in a way for me that you should just do your work, and I mean.
Talking about just do your work, I mean, after 24 of February, a lot of things changed for us, and we started to try, all Ukrainians started to try to understand what can we do in these circumstances. A lot of people started volunteering, a lot started to make some communication about about what's going on inside. So I'd like to know, in fact, how did these major events that changed our lives, how did it impacted your photographic practice, and did you think about the question, how can we represent the world today in contemporary epoch when which is quite where there's so much images, so much reporters that making the same photos, how to represent in the most accurate way what we are living now.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question during the last months, and actually now it's it's difficult. In my opinion, it's difficult to represent the war for Ukrainian photographers because we don't have any distance with what is going on, and we are living this through, and war is still going on. That's why, as a photographer, as an artist, you are fully immersed in that, and we are not photojournalists. I mean, we are not interested in just showing the information like some events. We are mostly interested in reflecting it.
Where did you where did you were when the war started? Did you were in Ukraine or somewhere else?
I was in France actually when the war started, but I came back to France just like 3 weeks before. I came back to France in the beginning of February, and I remember that the atmosphere was already quite tense at that moment. And when the war started, I mean, it was a huge shock for everybody, and including me. And I spent like 6 months in France before coming back to Ukraine this summer. And what actually I felt when I came back is that I didn't want to photograph people. I wanted to like show the landscape and the destruction that I saw there. Because, I mean, the war is something so huge that you just like you feel overwhelmed by what's going on. And I wanted to memorize what I saw in Ukraine.
What are there these spaces? In which city did you make these photos?
I actually when I'm in Ukraine, I'm most of the time working between like 2 cities, between Kiev and Odessa, because I come from Odessa, but I spend a lot of time in Kiev also. So I went to the region of Kiev to see the towns that were under Russian occupation and that were liberated this spring.
So
And
like
I wanted
Irpin, Borodyanka, Hostomel, this kind of city around Kiev.
Yeah, Irpin, Hostomel, Borodyanka. Yes, this is, for example, is residential buildings near residential houses near Antonov Airport that was destroyed in the in the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. And
so there was a kind of lap of time from the beginning of the war and the time you made this documentation. You need like 6 months to go back and to start to take this picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult it was really difficult for me to witness everything on distance because, like, as every Ukrainian, I was following the news and Telegram, and the flow of images is so huge. I mean, it's the first war that we witness online, actually, and everybody is kind of a photojournalist because people share videos, they share pictures, and like you're overwhelmed by pictures, and you consume them quickly, you digest them quickly, and then there are new pictures the next day. So it's really, I mean, first of all, it's difficult to live through visually, and secondly, emotionally. So when I went back to Ukraine, I wanted like capture these places, but make pictures that wouldn't be like digested quickly as or like it's normally we digest like photojournalistic pictures.
Quickly consumed, yes.
And also I actually wanted to focus on what impressed me when I came back to Ukraine, and what impressed me was the emptiness that I found there. I found that, for example, like these places, they were so like silent, and a lot of people left. I mean, 7 million of Ukrainians were displaced due to the war, and it's actually one of the main things that I wanted to
Yes, it's kind of a very personal experience because, I mean, foreign photojournalists can't feel this difference from before and now. And when you leave this crowded and loud cities, you now can capture this contrast and the very great difference. Okay, Igor, can you talk to us about your work? How did it, which turn did it take? And how did you process all these events with your cameras and
Yeah. Is it working?
Ye-
No. So when the war started, I moved from Kharkiv to Lviv, and in the first days I was completely lost because I was in different city and I didn't know what's going on there. And from the first day, Magnum agency contacted me to help the photographers to photograph the war. So I was working with different Magnum photographers, and also at the point I was trying to take photographs by myself, and then I understood that first of all, a huge amount of foreign photographers, not just from Magnum, came, like the best photographers of the world came to Ukraine to take photographs of war. Also, a lot of great documentary photographers are also documenting this. So quite soon I understood that I don't want to take same or almost the same photographs of the same events, and I was trying to understand what should I do, what kind of photography should I produce to tell a different story, how to show the war without showing it so direct. And the answer was obvious soon because I understood that I have to talk about my experience, and my experience was I was living with different people in different houses. And first of all, like first house where I moved in, there were just 3 people in the beginning, and in 2 days there were 30 people. And I understood that this is something I can take photographs of. And because I did this series 10 years ago about how people live together, where is the mouse? I've understood that this is something I can continue, but in very different context. So what I started to do is I've started to continue my daily life series, but now with displaced people. And of course it has completely different atmosphere, right? Because back then it was young people having a nice time in Kharkiv, and now it's a lot of people who are sharing the place, but it's not their space. Like they reinvent their daily lives in different places. This is, for example, a girl who was she's 6 years old and she's playing this old piano in the dorm. And dorm was abandoned before, but now it's inhabited by displaced people. When I found this dorm, I started to go there very often because there were a lot of stories, a lot of people, and the people were cooking together for each other. And this is the family, I think. I will okay, so this is my friends from Kharkiv. Also, so how I started it, I was, first of all, I started to photograph people with whom I lived, but then I understood that a lot of my friends from Eastern Ukraine moved to West. I even met some of them randomly on the streets. So I asked them to come to the apartment and to spend some time with them and to take photographs how they live together. This is the family. They have 8 children, and I spent some time with them. I met them in March, and they were living in this dorm, in a small room in dorm. And Tatiana, the mother, she told me that she wished Putin could see these photographs so he will know how children are now living. And in a few months, in May, I came and she showed me a photograph on her phone and said, look, this is my house, and it was completely destroyed. So they now don't have place to come back. And I have a lot of stories like this. This girl is a good friend of mine. She was always also my student. She's a very talented artist. And she was so depressed because of war. And she was so productive as an artist before. But I met her a few times during the war, and she didn't do anything because she was so depressed and she just didn't know how to continue her art practice. Oh, and this story, I don't want to tell a lot of intimate stories, but this one is also important. Parents of these children, they already during the war, they found out that the mother, she has cancer, and the father has also a very bad disease, but they couldn't leave the country because they didn't have the documents with them. But finally, eventually they left. And also I tried to spend more times with them and to have some like more intimate moments because, for example, this girl, she said that the only place where she can be alone is the bathroom because she always, every room there are always a lot of people. So I was feeling quite bad that the only place where she can be alone, I also asked her to be there. So for this month, what I did, I was questioning myself what the home is, what's home for me, what's home for those people who lost there. And I know that a lot of people were very attached to their home and they were very unhappy. I was trying to question this concept of home and to try to convince myself that this attachment to material things are not, they don't matter anymore because now, like, we all had this idea of building our home, collecting our stuff there, but the world teaches us that we cannot rely on these things anymore. And this is also a crazy story. The guys, they're making cocktail Molotovs not far from their home, and I found myself that this is the reality of Ukrainian life now. And this is, he's painting floor on his new apartment.
And what do you do now? Do you come back to continue a series, or you finished it and you start something new?
So actually, it's the only series which is almost finished. I've did a lot of different projects when I was in Ukraine during this month, and now I will continue to edit, and so I will have a few more projects. It's like more personal ones, but I received a scholarship. Even before the war, I knew I applied for the scholarship, and I received the scholarship to study in UK. So in September, I moved to London, and now, first of all, I will continue work on all the photographs I did in Ukraine. But secondly, I probably will do photographs with refugees there, and I want to travel across Europe and photograph people because I still want to tell the stories how war influenced not just Ukraine but every people. In UK, a lot of people welcomed Ukrainians in their homes, and this is also something I want to tell. But for now, I'm a bit depressed because I'm happy that I received the scholarship to study, but also I'm depressed because I didn't want to leave Ukraine now. I feel that my place is there. So this is, and I cannot come back to Ukraine now because if I will not be able to leave. So for now, it's a very strange moment in my career and in my life.
Thank you very much, Igor. I just wonder whether our audience have some questions. Maybe it would be great to make some conversation and to no questions. Yes, okay.
Thank you both so much for your talks and to share these images. I find them stunningly beautiful, the way they're composed with such care. And the last 3 or 4 that you've shown us are really taken from above. Is there a reason why you select such camera angles in this series?
Yes, I realized this 10 years ago when I was doing my first daily life series, that this is a way of showing how people interact with each other and also the space in which they live. Because if you do it like from this angle, you are not showing the space so much because walls are not containing as much information as everything from above. So this is something I learned back then, and actually I was thinking that I want to continue this series, but I didn't know how. And then when I moved and I met a lot of displaced people, I understood that this is something like to show, like this is the best angle to show this. It was also, it's very interesting how people react, because back then it was strange. The way I did this series, my first, like 10 years ago, I was staying on the tables, on the chairs, and ladders, and trying to take photographs like this, which was not very comfortable. In 10 years, technology changed, so now I had my camera on the monopode, and remote control. And on my mobile phone, I saw what my camera sees, so I can do precise composition and put it. But it was interesting that people, they didn't see me taking photographs of them. I was staying with something, and I was like watching my phone. And it make our interaction very natural. They didn't pose. And this is also an interesting thing. Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you all. I would like to add one question. I think it's interesting to maybe still discuss Daria because Igor, for you, it's more the fly on the wall perspective. I think what you explain is that you're really, okay, you're in the room, but they don't, yeah, you have that role of the fly on the wall. And then with Daria, you also explained how, you know, it was too difficult to photograph people. In your previous series, Temporary Homes, and even earlier work, you did have that personal approach towards people. But also many other Ukrainian artists I talked with since the invasion, they find it too difficult to photograph people and therefore choose different directions. And I think with your work that also turned to a new direction, creating the landscapes. Do you feel like you would like to continue and go back to Ukraine to further develop this series, or do you also have new ideas for different projects?
I feel that now definitely I want to come back to photograph people, actually. But I think that at that moment when I come back to Ukraine, like I felt so much pain, and it's like I had this feeling that I didn't know where to start. And when you photograph people, you get to know them, you learn their stories. And I remember that when I exchange with some people I met there in these places, I just like emotionally it was really difficult to digest, and I couldn't take their pictures because I felt it was not the right moment, and I didn't wanted to take something more from them because they already went through so much. And I remember I was in Andriivka. It's like a little village near Borodyanka, and they just stopped to take a picture of the door. And the woman who lived in this place, like she went out and she spoke to me, and like all what she told me, because like their village was under Russian occupation, and it was the place where I think they had like the most of rapes. And what she told me, I mean, it was so intense that I even didn't dare to ask her for taking picture. But I definitely want to come back to Ukraine to not continue this series, because I think it was kind of like a passage between like what I was doing before the full-scale invasion and what I will do when I come back. But now I would definitely like to focus more on people, and I think that I would like to continue to focus on young generation, because there are a lot of people who actually do like volunteering, who do military service, and what you can feel in Ukraine is that everybody is very united, and there is still hope. I mean, I would like to focus on future and on hope, and on those who will rebuild everything once the war is over.
I want to add that on photographing people, I was in Bucha just when it was rebelated, and I never experienced this, but people, they actually run to me on the streets, they grab me, and they said, because I had a vest which says press, and they, with tears, they said, please tell my story. And they almost forced me to go to their homes. Some forced me to go to destroy building. He put up the rock and he said, "Look, this is my friend. There is a dead body there. This is my friend Sergei." He was crying, and I was so the way people really wanted to tell us their stories, and it was so powerful. And it was so touching. And also, I wanted to add something about how people were united, because when on the first day I moved from Kharkiv to Lviv, people were so. I actually, for the first time in my life, I felt that there is no other people. We are all like one, because they were all helping. Almost all the doors were open. People are welcoming us to live in their places. There were always food for displaced people. There were always clothes, and everyone was so helpful. And it's a huge experience. And it's like maybe not a very good thing to say, but in a weird way, I am very grateful that I have this experience, because it's changed my life completely, my perception of people and of the world. So the war is the worst experience in my life, but also in a way the most important experience. And yes.
And what is going on with your dormitory series? What are you going to do with this? Do you still is in contact?
Yeah, actually, after the 24th of February, I remember that a lot of people they got interested in this work because it became more political than it initially meant to be. And I couldn't look these pictures with the same eyes, and I wanted to know actually what happened to the students, because with some of them I was still in contact, and we were following each other in social networks. And I did a video that is not presented here today, but I recorded our Zoom interviews with students, and I asked them same questions, like those students with whom I was still in contact. And that first of all helped me to calm down a bit and to learn how they were doing and how the war actually affected their lives. But also I made a body of work that I project now with photographic series, and it helped me to to put in context this body of work that was done before the full-scale invasion.
Thank you. Maybe there are some other questions from the audience. No. Do you have something to add to our discussion? Okay, I would like to say that in the frame of Paris Photo, there are several venues that present Ukrainian photographers. There are Susan Tarasiev galleries that present a series of Boris Mikhailov. There is Alexandra de Vivero's galleries that present several artists affiliated to the Kharkiv School of Photography, and who present as well a series of documentation of the war of another young Ukrainian photographer, Vladislav Krasnoschok, and Sergei Lebedynsky. I can just wish a lot of luck and courage to Daria and to Igor, and to hope that they will continue their work, and they will give the world a look from the very inner and subjective view from the how we live and how do we come through this very dark times, and also how do we rebuild our country, and yes, what did you say, that how do people, young people, not only young people, continue to maintain the normal life right now?